The next part is min adab al-mu'ashara ma ala zawja li zawjiha. So here is a section about the rights of the husband. What obligations does the woman have? And so he opens with a very powerful hadith. He says here, this is reported by Abu Umama, the Prophet ﷺ was heard to have said, if it was permissible for anyone to prostrate to anyone else, it would have been that I ordered the woman to prostrate to her husband. This is not ubudiyatan, it's not a form of worship, but this is ihtiraman. It's out of respect. And this is what was suggested to the Prophet ﷺ by his companions, how they should greet him. Because this is how the leaders of Rome and Persia were greeted by their subjects, if you will, by their followers, that they would prostrate to them, or they would bow to them, and that bowing act is something that is still prevalent today in some parts of the world, where you would bow to royalty. And even doing that in Islam is impermissible. You cannot make ruku' to someone else. That is reserved for Allah. As is sujood. It is reserved for Allah because it is from the most obvious acts of servitude and worship in our tradition. So the context of this hadith doesn't mean that the wife is to worship the husband. It means that the wife is to show respect and to honor the husband. He says, due to the great right that he has over her. And this hadith was reported by Imam Ahmad and also reported by Imam al-Nasa'i and other collections of hadith. He says, and then there are numerous ahadith of a similar sort that indicate the great right that the husband has, the obligation that the wife has towards the husband, the many, many different obligations and rights that the man has. So, when we were talking about the rights of the wife, there were many that he listed. Here, he's not going to list many. He's going to list two. The first is as-satr. As-satr is, it is protection, and siyana, which is to gain their confidence. Right, to take care of and to protect and essentially to gain the confidence of the husband. That's one of the biggest rights of the wife towards her husband, is that she protects him, conceals what needs to be concealed, and gains his confidence while doing so. The second thing is satisfaction, is to be satisfied with your husband's leadership and his provision, because essentially that's what it's about. That's what it's about. We talked about this earlier, and it's about, as Allah says in the Quran, الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. He says that men are overseers of women, that the man has been charged with the responsibility of leadership, and that is what the Prophet ﷺ said. You're getting tired now. You good. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that each of you is a shepherd and you're responsible for your flock. The man is a shepherd for his family or his house, and he's responsible for that. And the woman is responsible for the house of her husband and his children. Each of you are shepherds and you are responsible for your flocks. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. And it's reported in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And so here, the respect and the rights and the satisfaction are due in large part because of that charge of leadership and that responsibility that the man has been assigned. So satisfaction, of course, he says here as an example, some of the pious women of the past, that when their husband would go out to work, they would say, Iyaka wa kasb al-haram. Beware of haram earnings. Beware of the unlawful salary. فَإِنَّا نَصْبِرُ عَلَى الْجُوعِ وَلَا نَصْبِرُ عَلَى النَّارِ. We can be patient with hunger, but we cannot be patient with hell. And we're talking about not a living hell. We're talking about Jahannam. Wal-iyadhu billah. So this was the attitude of the pious of the past, that they would rather be hungry than they would live, that they would be living a life that could lead to their demise in the hereafter. And so this is an example of satisfaction. It's also an example of siyana, of setter, of being protecting and looking out for your husband. He says that the obligation, so these are the rights. He says, well, wajib, this is an obligation, is that when it comes to his wealth, she does not spend it extravagantly. And when he basically feeds himself, if you will, or what he buys for himself of food, if she consumes, whatever she consumes, if it's done with his pleasure and his permission, kana laha mithla ajrihi, then she will share in the reward, meaning the reward of him spending, the reward of him purchasing. If you employ that wealth and he's happy with that, then you will get the same reward as if it was your wealth that you were spending. But if you do so and he's dissatisfied with the way that you've spent that money, then he will have the reward, وَعَلَيْهِ الْوَزْرِ, and she will have a sin. He closes here, and this is good for the parents to grasp as part of the responsibilities of parents towards their children. He says it is a requirement, if you will, or necessary that the parents they kind of nurture their daughters in such a way before they leave their home and go to their husband's house, so that they understand what it means to be a wife. And he says it's also appropriate that the woman stay at home. And I know that this is not the case for a lot of our circumstances. However, that is the preference. And he says, and this was something traditional, that they he says lazimatan limaghziliha, which is the spindle, the women that used to sew and stitch, that she worked from home if that's what she does, and that she's not overly excessive with the neighbors, interacting with the neighbors. She's also not excessively gloomy when her husband is away. And she protects him in his absence and in his presence. She does what she can to make him happy in whatever circumstance they find themselves. She certainly does not betray her husband, in any way, whether that be her nafs, her physical being, meaning like adultery or something of the nature, or his money, that it's not spoiled or ruined. And then also, she does not allow into his home who he does not want in there. And he does not, and she doesn't allow anyone in unless he's given her permission to do that. And the permission here is it can be general. If your husband doesn't want somebody over, that's his right. And it can be, look, you can have whoever you want over. I don't really care. Or if you know that it's a non-issue, then it doesn't need to be every single time you're running to your husband and asking. It's not a parent with a child here, but it is a cooperative relationship. And this is in order that his care, if you will, or his aspiration is that she will be well taken care of, and that she will have a good life and live in good circumstances, that she manages the home well. She's able to, kind of manage the affairs of the house to the best of her ability. And that she should give preference to her husband even over her own self. as well as her relatives, right? She should give preference to her relatives, to her family and her kin, even over her own self. And that may be hard to hear for some, but that is as written by Imam al-Maqdisi, rahimahullah ta'ala.